All right, so terrible, terrible day. Terrible day for the news, for the country, for the world. I'm going to get to a few different stories here, but obviously the biggest one for Americans is the shooting and killing of conservative provocateur and activist Charlie Kirk. He was 31 years old and he was gunned down, shot in the neck at a university campus in Utah. We don't know who the shooter was yet, so a lot of speculation is going on, but we don't know if that's particularly accurate. I mean, right now, the obvious theory is that he was gunned down for political reasons, and that's horrible. Political violence is terrible, and we should be seeing absolutely zero political violence in this country. This is a country where we get things done through politics, through democracy, and through the debate of ideas. And it's obvious. It's stating the obvious. I know, but political violence is wrong. And I think what worries me so much, I mean, beyond just the tragedy of a man being killed, a man who had children, a man who I should add I disagree with probably on almost all issues, but I personally don't believe we should kill the people we disagree with unless we're at war with, a foreign power or something. Uh, but the real worry is that political violence leads to escalation. Escalation leads to more violence. And who knows where it stops? Who knows where it ends? Who knows how bad things can get? And the reaction that I've been seeing online is, unsurprisingly, fairly awful. On the left, I have seen from, people on Twitter and stuff, not from uh, anybody important, but then again, I haven't looked too hard. But the reaction from some people has been surprisingly awful. Dancing on the grave type stuff. And a lot of talk about how Kirk was against gun control and how he said things like, some people have to, there's going to be mass shootings. That's just part of preserving the Second Amendment, which I'm going to get to more on in a little bit because I think that's an interesting statement that deserves a little more scrutiny. On the right, it's been just as bad in a lot of ways. Elon Musk tweeted, "The left is the party of murder," which I think is extremely dangerous rhetoric at a time like this, at any time really. It's also stupid because the left is not a party at all. I don't know how you can say the left is the party of murder. That's like saying the right is the party of something. The left, the right, these aren't parties. These are ideologies. These are very broad blanket terms to describe a grab bag of ideologies, actually. Um, Most people on the left are not murderers. They don't want violence. Most people on the right are not murderers. They don't want violence. We could get into a tit for tat type thing and tally up the number of right wing assassinations and shootings versus the number of left wing. And just statistically speaking, there would be more right wing. Right wing militarism, right wing violence is just higher than left wing. But we've seen an uptick in left wing violence lately, and that's a problem. And of course, if you wanted to look at the whole globe and the history of right wing or left wing violence, you'd have to go back and look at what Stalin did, what Hitler did. I mean, radical ideology, left or right, can lead to violence, and that's why we have a democratic republic. That's why we have a system in place where we're supposed to solve our problems through debate and voting and policy and not violence. Um, so yeah, Charlie Kirk, 31 years old, father of two, killed. There was also a shooting at a school in Denver. Uh, so these things keep happening. Violence keeps happening. Gun violence keeps happening. Now, I disagree with Charlie Kirk and with many on the right when it comes to gun control. I'm also pretty fatalistic about it. I don't think that there will be any meaningful gun control, probably in my lifetime. Uh, but I do think there are sensible ways where you can still preserve Second Amendment freedoms and have better gun control that keeps guns out of the hands of people who might use them to shoot up a school, for instance, or to go to a rally, a political rally, and shoot. a politician or an activist or a celebrity or whatever. I think there are things that can be done. I don't want to get into that here, but I think this idea that we just can't have this conversation at all, that any infringement on gun ownership or gun laws is some kind of attack on freedom, I think that's wrong. Um, but I do think that Charlie Kirk made a good point about that they're to preserve this version of the Second Amendment, this idea of freedom. There will be mass shootings. There will be gun violence and gun death. There will be. That is the cost of freedom, and freedom always comes at a cost. And I think that's where that debate, really, the philosophical debate, has to take place, right? And that doesn't just apply to gun violence. That applies to all sorts of freedoms, right? That applies to our entire justice system. That applies to the security state. I mean, I still remember tomorrow or today, depending on when I post this video, is 9/11. And I still remember, I remember vividly 9/11 happening and that whole horrible tragedy. And one of the things that we did as a country and our political leaders did, and in the wake of 9/11, is they traded some of our freedom for security, right? Freedom to board planes just without hardly any security at all. Now we have the TSA. There was the Patriot Act, the formation of the Department of Homeland Security, and then multiple wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We traded some freedoms for some security, and there's a debate to be had whether that was the right thing to do. Freedom sounds great. It sounds awesome until bad things happen and people die, and then people clamor for security. I was going to make a video about about the a couple of recent killings. There was a Ukrainian refugee who was stabbed to death by a 23-year-old man who apparently suffers from schizophrenia and has quite a rap sheet that is quite awful. It was another horrible video and a terrible tragedy. There was another young woman who was killed by a burglar. I believe he's like a 32-year-old black man. I'm going to make a whole video on that. I'll just touch on it real briefly. Maybe I'll make that video also. But it kind of gets to this. I mean, first of all, it's interesting to see how many people are just posting about black men killing white women. This kind of, we could do a whole discussion. Maybe I'll have this discussion in another video about fear mongering. But the idea of being soft on crime, it's kind of similar to the idea of being soft on gun ownership and gun regulations. There's this. It's weird how much they align in a way, because I mean, guns are a huge part of most violent crime, right? So if you're not regulating guns, you're kind of innately soft on crime. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Elsewhere in the world, Poland has fired on Russian drones, which is the first direct engagement of a NATO country with Russia in this Ukraine war. So that could lead to World War III. Fun. Then there's in Nepal, there was a violent overthrow of the government. I haven't read too much about that, so I'm not really going to talk about it. But this is a hell of a day for news and for tragedy and for violence. And I think, back to this point about Elon's tweet, the left is the party of murder. I just think that's such a, and you see like on Twitter, the reaction to this is the left. The left is violent. The left wants violence. The left wants to kill you. The left wants to murder everyone. That is crazy talk. That's just crazy talk. Again, most liberals are not violent people. Most conservatives are not violent people. Most Americans are not violent people who want their political opponents to die. But I will say that, on the other hand, I have been pretty appalled by the reaction to, like, the CEO who was killed by that guy Luigi, and the whole Luigi effect thing. This sort of gleeful, that's what he had that coming because, the health insurance companies are so vile and wicked, and they are in a lot of ways. I mean, it's a terrible system we have. But again, like when you start cheering on violence, whether it's against political opponents or CEOs or whatever, people of other races, of other genders, you lead to, well, a normalizing effect to some degree, um, and I just hate what this culture's become. I really do. I think it's I think it's this kind of insanity has taken over everyone, and it's wild. It's wild to see. It is an insanity, and it's pushed by social media. It's pushed by the algorithm. Excuse me. It's pushed by um, political leaders. It's pushed by people like Elon Musk. It's pushed by moneyed interests, by the wealthy, and I think it's this whole project to divide people, divide us based on these crazy, this idea that somehow liberals and conservatives are these wildly different species almost, right? That somehow they are at a genetic level different and that we should fear the other side and hate them. And you go right back to the 2 minutes hate with from 1984. I mean, George Orwell was brilliant, right? He saw all this shit coming. Um, and we have to resist that. I think if you want to talk about resistance, I think a big part of it is to resist this idea that the most fundamental thing about us is our political beliefs. That we should define ourselves so completely by our politics, and to define each other, because we really other everybody. We start to other everybody, and we don't talk anymore. We don't we don't remember or realize that truly our our commonalities outweigh our differences. I mean, yeah, we have big political differences, right? Big ideas, cultural ideas that are very very different from one another. But I mean, that's true even within the left or within the right, right? Like I'm constantly constantly talking about all this stuff on the left that drives me crazy, and I consider myself someone on the left. I mean, I guess I'm probably pretty moderate when you really look at everything, because the world has changed and my ideas have remained fairly, stable. I've watched as the younger generations have gone off the deep end in a lot of ways with all of the DEI stuff, and fundamentally, I still think that most people have very similar views on most things. Whether maybe not the same views on God or the same exact ideas on how high the marginal tax rate should be, or we have a little bit different views on what our national security should look like, or some people are more gung ho about going off to war, and some people think we should be more isolationist, and we have some people are like, yay, capitalism is the best thing ever, and other people are a little more like, no, we need more redistribution. But these things are like just ideas about how to run society. They're not like who we are, right? They shouldn't be. And this whole chronically online culture that we've created has infected our brains like a parasite. And I'm not to be a conspiracy theorist, but it does feel like this is what they want. This is what they want, the mysterious they in their dark towers, looking down over the masses. Because I mean, a populace divided is one that's easier to control. It's easier to hold on to your power if people are fighting with each other, instead of looking up and saying, hey, wait a minute. Like, it doesn't matter if you're, a rich conservative or a rich liberal. You're billionaires. You're all these oligarchs, these powerful people are staying powerful, getting more wealthy, while the rest of the world struggles, and while Americans struggle. And um, one great way to take our mind off of the difficulty of just affording to live is to keep us divided. And we see, as various industries are destroyed, from the taxi industry to journalism, and these tech companies just kind of run roughshod over everything. Like we just feed into it. We go on their apps and we feed into the conflict and into the division. And I this 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 incident with the young woman who was shot in her home in the robbery. Um, Elon had tweeted something like what was it? Again, maybe I'll make a whole video about this, but about how like repeat offenders turn to violence, and this guy had been arrested 40 times, and I pointed out in my tweet that actually he'd only been arrested 23 times. That's still a lot, yeah, but but like let's get the facts straight. And people were so mad, like, how are you defending this guy? Oh, only 23 times. I'm like, I'm not really defending this guy. I'm just pointing out that like we should get our facts straight because we're just feeding. I mean, so many people are always like, oh, fake news, fake news. You can't trust the news. But then they don't examine anything. They don't interrogate anything. They see a tweet and they just believe it at face value. And it's like, yeah, 40 arrests is quite a few more than 23. Not all those arrests. Also, if you're arrested, that doesn't mean that you're guilty. Like, I don't know. I think that like when it comes to the crime issue, it's kind of like I do think that probably a lot of liberal cities, governments, liberal policymakers have been too soft on crime. Probably. I mean, like I had made a video about tent cities and other things. Like I think that you have to have good policing to keep cities safe, to keep people safe, or you create a backlash. I've been thinking a lot about backlash. Like there's always backlash, right? There's backlash to backlash. But if you don't have policies that keep people feeling safe and that keep violent criminals off the street, then you're going to have a backlash that leads to conservative, tough on crime politicians taking over. And even if that's just perception, I mean, the reality on the ground is that a lot of prisons are overcrowded. A lot of police forces are underfunded. A lot of cities have a hard time, even getting all these criminals through the system in the first place. And then we have the legacy of the war on drugs that has led to a lot of prison overcrowding with offenders who are just in there for doing drugs. They didn't hurt anybody. But there's this, I've seen so much of this reaction to these violent crimes, and I understand it. People are reacting emotionally to horrific crimes. But the reaction is, if you've been arrested that many times, you should just be locked away forever. And it's like, well, what if, I mean, yeah, if you were arrested for assaulting people and raping people and killing people and, then yeah, lock them up and throw away the key. Sure. But I mean, a lot of people are just arrested for loitering or possession of a small amount of drugs or whatever nonviolent crimes. You can't actually seriously suggest that merely being arrested is part of the thing that you're being judged for. You should be judged for the crimes you committed and are convicted of in a court of law. Justice does matter, and sometimes we forget that in our lust for vengeance or retaliation or whatever. So yeah, I think I should probably just make a whole video on that because I don't have any of that prepared right now. Mostly I want to just talk about the Charlie Kirk thing, and it's terrible. It's not something to celebrate. To anyone on the left celebrating that, fuck off. It's not good. Even if you disagreed with Charlie Kirk, like I did, I really have no fond feelings whatsoever for Charlie Kirk. I still think it's a horrible tragedy. We should not be killing people. You should not be shot to death because you pissed some people off with your opinions, whether you agree with him or not. He didn't deserve what happened to him. His family didn't deserve what happened to him. If you're on the right and you're, out there just like lumping everyone that you disagree with on the left into this basket of deplorables, like all leftists, all liberals just want to kill you, you're an idiot. Stop it. Everyone needs to stop that shit. This fucking rhetoric is so crazy. It's so unhealthy, and a free society cannot devolve into what we are becoming. And I think, if anything, like the project going forward has to be some way of de-escalating. It's like an arms race right now. It's like an ideological arms race. And everyone in media and in the halls of power is complicit. And a lot of people who are influencers on YouTube or Twitter or social media are complicit in egging people on and in casting and othering the other side, the liberals or the conservatives, the leftists, the right wingers, the centrists, the moderates. Um, now we're not usually portrayed as being violent killers in the center, uh, because nobody listens to us. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what hopefully rational people have to say. We just want blood. There will be blood. Yeah. So I have some other things I want to talk about. There's a new show on HBO called Task, which I've seen the first episode of. It's from the creator of Mayor of Easttown, and so far really good. But I'm only one episode in. I watched the first 3 episodes of Only Murders in the Building, season 5, which is just now out. Did not like it. Very disappointed. Um, Maybe I'll talk about that some more in a different video. And my surprise show, the show that I'm enjoying way more than I thought I would, is The Terminalist Dark Wolf, which, if you haven't seen, is a really fun, it's basically like Call of Duty the show. It's a prequel spinoff to The Terminalist with Chris Pratt. This one starring Taylor Kitsch as his friend Ben Edwards, like 7 years previous to the main show. But yeah, it's super fun, like military spy thriller. Definitely recommend it. It's not like, gonna change your life or make you think, but it's very exciting. Beyond that, Silk Song is out. Been playing that. Hollow Knight Silk Song, super, super fun. I want to talk more about that. We might do a podcast talking about that and the pricing controversy. I love that it costs $20. I think it's wonderful, but not everyone agrees. Some people think this is hurting other indie developers. So that's just a little roundup of things that I've been thinking about. I've also been working on my own tabletop role-playing game. I've actually been like obsessively working on this game. It's taken up hours and hours and hours of my life. Well, days, really, weeks. But maybe I'll release it. Maybe I'll do a Kickstarter. I think it's pretty cool. We'll see. Anyways, thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and peace.